What's going on, guys? In this video, I'm going to tell you how you can create new HMOs. Now, right now, we're actually in one of my HMO development projects. This one is a family home that I'm converting into a 6-bedroom HMO. I'm going to take you around, but I'm also going to tell you what I look for in HMO developments and how I find them, what type of properties we buy to make into HMOs, and then the full process from start to finish. Okay guys, so right now we're actually in the living area. Now, this used to be a small kitchen, and one thing I like to do with HMOs is actually change the layout to create more space, a better layout and more bedrooms. Now, as you can see, we've now converted this into an open plan area. So we've put in steel beams right here, and actually we're actually suspending the ceiling right now, and basically we've put a big steel beam so we can create this open space. So this is going to be a kitchen living area. One thing when it comes to HMOs is finding a property that's big enough to convert into a HMO. So this is a crucial thing what you need to look at, and that's probably the number one thing we look at. Now, typically I specialize in 6 to 8 bed HMOs. However, I do have 4 beds, 5 beds, 6 beds. So it completely varies, but I'd say the minimum has got to be a 4 bed. There's no point doing a 3 bed HMO. Maybe if you're in London where each room costs, you can rent a room for say £900. But if you're looking in the East Midlands area or like kind of a medium to low cost area, then yes, you want to buy something that you can do minimum 4 bedroom HMO with. This will be a nice open plan kitchen. Also, to create more space and more bedrooms is an extension. For example, if you look at the back out here, we could have done an extension here to create more space in the property. So that's another thing you can do, is extensions. Now you've got to think, is it worth doing an extension? Most of the time for myself it's not, because an extension is a very costly thing to do. So unless you're doing the work yourself, if you know how to do extensions, maybe you can do it for cheaper. But for me, a single story extension, it might cost an extra £20,000 on top of your initial budgets. So size-wise, the rooms need to be a minimum 8 square meters. It varies from what area the property is situated, as each council have different rules and regulations when it comes to room sizes for HMOs. However, the good rule of thumb is typically it's got to be 8 square meters or above to be classed as a lettable room. So that's one thing to keep in mind, 8 square meters. One easy fix and one easy way of creating more rooms in a HMO is basically, say you have a normal family home and you have a large room which is 22 square meters. Well, one thing you can actually do is you can split, so you can partition that room into 2 rooms. And yeah, that's one thing you can do to create 2 rooms from one large area. I'll show you an example of something we've done right here. This was a property in Nottingham that we turned a large area into 2 bedrooms. So we'll typically do something like this to create more rooms. Another thing when it comes to finding the right HMOs, the right houses to actually turn into HMOs, is the location. The rule of thumb is it needs to be near something. So it needs to be near a city centre, it needs to be near a high street, it needs to be near a hospital, it needs to be near an Amazon warehouse, it needs to be near something with a lot going on. So you need to think of your tenant type. Obviously, if you're targeting students, it needs to be near the university or have good transport links to the university. So you need to really think, what type of tenants are you trying to get in the property? When it's done, when it's finished, who do you want to rent the property to? And one thing that you need to bear in mind as well is something called Article 4. Now, Article 4 is basically a planning restriction which says that if you want to create a new HMO in specific areas that are covered by the Article 4, then you need to apply for planning permission, even if you wanted to do a 3-bed HMO, guys. So it's very crucial that you understand Article 4, you understand in the areas that you're looking to buy and create a new HMO. First thing you need to do is find out the laws in that area when it comes to Article 4. Is there an Article 4 direction in place? You can do that by emailing the planning department of the council of the area that you're looking at, and they'll tell you if they have an Article 4 in that area. Now, where I live in Nottingham, the whole city boundary is actually covered by Article 4. So Article 4 is a major component and a major thing you need to find out. Best way to do it, email planning, they'll tell you straight away. You can even send them the address if you want to be extra sure. So a few people have asked me, do I actually buy properties in Article 4 areas? Now, the truth is I do. I actually do have some HMOs that are in the Article 4. However, there was existing HMOs. So when I bought them, there was already a HMO. And this video is obviously creating new HMOs. So basically you can buy existing HMOs, but just make sure you have something called a certificate of lawfulness, which is a planning document to say that in the eyes of the planners, the property is definitely a HMO. Because if you don't have that, you're basically running the risk of having legal problems, having problems getting the license, because they might come out to license it and say, well, we'll give you the license, but you need to get the certificate of lawfulness. Now, to get the certificate of lawfulness, you actually have to do a lot. You have to provide 4 years tenancy agreements with no gaps. You have to provide 4 years worth of council tax documents. So best rule of thumb is make sure you have a certificate of lawfulness in place before you buy a HMO in an Article 4 area. So this is something called an intermittent strip. Excuse my pronunciation on that one, but this is basically a fire door, and you need to make sure you put fire doors in any HMO.
Intumescent smoke seals are crucial in the installation of fire doors. Without them, not only is the fire rating of the door reduced by 50%, but by now, killer smoke would have been spreading to other parts of the building.
So this is a fire door, and as you can see, we don't have the handle on it just yet. However, we actually have specific handles which are fire resistant handles. Now you need these because basically what a fire door is doing is, in the event of a fire, it basically slows down the possibility of it entering the room. So once this is shut, say if there was a fire on the outside, it would take longer with a fire door for the fire to penetrate into this room. So that's essentially why they do it. These strips actually expand. So these small strips here will actually go into some sort of foam material, and it goes and it kind of blocks off the door. So yeah, fire doors, it's another big thing. You need fire doors in a HMO. All right guys, this is another thing. This is called emergency lighting. Now, as you can see, this is a funny shaped corridor. So this is not the typical corridor we have. However, this is an emergency light. So if all the electrics stop working in the property, then what it means is that emergency light will still come on. So emergency lighting is a legal requirement for HMOs, hence why we have to put it in. But we do ours on a sensor as well. So if we're just walking around the house, it'll come on when you get close. But it is also an emergency light. So if all the electrics did shut off, that would still work. In the event of a fire, it will come in very handy, because if someone's in a corridor trying to escape the building, they'll have light so they can see where they're going if it was in the night time, for example. So that's one thing we have to do as well. Another thing is sockets. So in each bedroom, you typically have to have a few double sockets per bedroom. I like to put in 3 or 4, depending on how big the bedroom is. So as you can see here, these are just double sockets. So the double sockets actually have to be a certain distance from the skirting board. They can't be right on the skirting board, they have to be a good amount up. So it's annoying, but as you can see with this one, what we've done is we didn't replaster this whole wall because the wall is actually in good condition. What we did was we removed the old one here, and we just chased in the electrics, added this one in, and then we've sanded it down and then painted over it. So that saved us money by doing that. If we actually wanted to replaster the whole wall, that's going to cost more rather than patching and sanding. So that's the way you can save money on your HMO refurbs. Another thing you need to consider when it comes to HMOs and creating new HMOs is funding. Do you have enough money to do a HMO conversion and buy the actual property? So you need to factor in everything. When you're running your numbers, which is basically a term developers like to use, and it basically just means when you're analyzing a deal. So you need to make sure when you are running the numbers that you have everything broken down. So how much deposit you're gonna have to put in, how much legal fees, so solicitor fees, how much stamp duty you're gonna have to pay. So break down all the costs, and then you need to calculate the refurb, how much is it going to take for you to do up the property. Now the best way is, if you do have a reliable build team, is actually bring them to the property and get their opinion and get a quote from them, their exact quote on how much it's going to take to do the full HMO conversion. That's another thing, is making sure you're tracking all the costs and you're putting it down on paper and you calculate exactly how much you're going to need to do the project. There's nothing worse than running out of money halfway through a project. This is another thing, making sure you have a HMO mortgage. This is a specialist mortgage exactly for HMOs, guys. So you need to make sure you are on a HMO mortgage. If you're buying a building and you want to convert it into a HMO, you can buy it on bridge and finance, or you can buy it on a buy-to-let. If it's in really good condition, then you can buy it on a buy-to-let, and then you can convert it to a HMO. If it's run down, it needs a lot of work, you're gonna have to buy it on bridge and finance. Now, realistically, you should be doing everything on bridge and finance, which is basically a short-term mortgage. So bridge and finance is a short-term loan. They'll let you buy the property and you have 12 months to basically remortgage it or sell it and pay back the bridge and lenders. So that's how that works. It is typically more expensive. So let's say you came off the bridge before the 12 months, then you get a partial refund. So say if you only stayed on the bridge for 6 months, but you paid for 12, they'll give you back that 6 months worth of interest. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You should be doing HMO conversions on bridge and finance. You can potentially do them on buy-to-lets, but it's not the best way. It's not the way I'd recommend. I'd recommend you do it on bridge and finance. Finding a good build team is a very hard thing to do. I'm lucky that I have 2 really good teams that I do call upon. They're reliable, they're trustworthy, and it's great for building my portfolio and my portfolio of my joint venture partners, because they're reliable, they give us a good price, they show up, and that's what you need. And that's another massive component to creating new HMOs, is working with the right build team. Now, if they've never done a HMO before, I wouldn't recommend you work with them. However, if they've never done a HMO, but they've done lots of family homes, then you can work with them. However, you need to be onto them. So work very closely with them and make sure they're doing everything correctly. So it's going to take a lot more work on your side as the developer, as the person that's creating this new HMO, to make sure the builders know exactly what they're doing. But if you have a reliable team that you can call upon that's done a load of HMOs, then it requires less input, because you're not having to teach them about regulations. They should know. So either way, make sure you're onto the build team, you're staying in touch, you're showing up on site, you're checking the work, you're in good communication with the lead contractor or your team. One thing I wouldn't recommend is that you do individual trades, because people don't like to work on other random people's projects. So another thing, HMO licensing. That is one thing you do need to consider. Basically, in order to get a HMO license, you need to comply with all of the HMO regulations. So basically, you need to look on the council's website for the HMO regulations, find all of them, and make sure you're implementing them into your project. Now for me, because I've done obviously 13, 14 HMOs now, I understand the requirements very well. It's like pretty much common knowledge for myself, but that comes with time, guys. You will learn it yourself as well. So it's not rocket science, it's all on the website. You can email them if you have any questions. You can also get a HMO officer from the licensing department to come out to the property to view your project and to help you with any questions you may have. They are very helpful, they're working with you. Every time someone gets a HMO license on a property, they get paid. So they want you to get a HMO license. Of course, you need to. It's a legal requirement to have a HMO license. It depends area by area. If it's in an Article 4 area, you'll need a HMO license even for a 3-bed HMO or a 4-bed. So in some non-Article 4 areas, you don't need it for a 4-bed. You will need it for a 5, 6, 7, 8-bed. HMO licensing, don't be scared of getting a license. I've seen some people, they say, oh, is it hard to get a license in Nottingham? It's not the licensing that's the problem. It's the whole thing of planning permission. Do you have planning permission in place? If you do, then yeah, you can get a license if the property complies with the regulations. So main things when it comes to licensing requirements is room sizes got to be on point, emergency lighting has to be in place in the correct areas, you need fire doors, intermittent fire strips on the doors, door closures, adequate amenity spaces. This is things like the dining room and the living room. you need adequate space for the tenants to live. Once you have all your certificates, and they will all be on the council's website as well, on what you need, and once you have all your certificates in place, you fill out the application, you provide the floor plan, you provide your certificates, you pay £700 to £900 for the HMO license application fee, and voila, you've got it. You don't get it straight away though, it's not that easy. You have to wait until they either come out, assess the property, or sometimes they'll actually just issue you the license based on what you've provided. So it completely depends how busy they are, I guess. That's licensing. Remember, don't be scared. So this is just a few things that I like to do for my HMOs. But right now, guys, I got a HMO to crack on with. So, cameraman, get out.